Let's talk some NHL with our next guest. From mayorsmanor.com, you can also follow him on twitter.com/mayornhl. It is John Hoven. Hey, John, how you doing?
You left out the best coast. I'm doing great. How are you?
That is true. I'm well. We're on cloud nine here in Montreal, obviously, with the festive atmosphere that is Montreal Canadiens playoffs, and we'll see what happens in Game 4. It can turn very quickly, but a nice atmosphere nonetheless right now in the city.
Yeah, for sure. And, hats off to Montreal. Coming into the series, I thought Boston was the better team, as I think a lot of people did, outside of Montreal, that is. And I had Boston winning that series in 6 games. But right now, you could absolutely see Montreal, with a clean sweep. It's been amazing how much they really have been in every game. So hats off to them. And like you said, it's still early. There's a long way to go. But the Canadians are certainly holding their own against the Bruins. Excuse me.
Well, let's dive into Kings and Ducks, John. I know you're able to cover this one really closely, being out there, and man, oh man, what a series this is going to be. I don't think we've seen the last of the Ducks. I know it's a big hole right now, but I think that we're going to see some pretty darn competitive games over the next couple in LA.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think anybody expected this series, to be a sweep, just like people didn't expect the first round between the Kings and the Sharks, to be over in 4 games. And it went 7 games against San Jose, which is what a lot of people would have expected. People just didn't necessarily think that it would unfold and it would go the way that it did to get to that Game 7. But I think you could see a lot of similarities to this series here against Anaheim. People that don't get an opportunity to watch these two teams very closely might have just looked at some of the numbers coming in and saw that Anaheim was 4-0-1 in the regular season, and specifically looked at how the Ducks manhandled the Kings in the outdoor game at Dodger Stadium and thought, okay, well, they are the Pacific Division champions. They are the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They should be able to take care of the Kings, who have a tendency to not score goals for long stretches of time. But if you really watch these two teams, what you'll see is they're very closely matched. Coach Bruce Boudreau talked about it coming into the series as well, saying that the Ducks could have just as easily been 0-5 instead of 4-0-1 during the regular season. They were close games for the most part between these two teams. They're crosstown rivals. They know each other very well, and I would say that probably the best part about this is it's going to raise the level of hatred between these two teams. You hear it all the time. It's a cliche. It is not really a rivalry until they meet in the playoffs, but that is so true. And you look at the teams that the Kings players tell you that they hate. They hate the Sharks. They hate the Canucks. These are teams they've met multiple times over the last couple years in the playoffs, and they haven't met the Ducks up until now. So this has been 20 years in the making, and the hatred is already starting to reach new levels with Corey Perry and his gamesmanship squirting water into Jeff Carter's glove. It's just been great stuff here through 2 games, and can't wait to get Game 3 going on Thursday night.
John, how's the SoCal fan reaction to this series? First time ever for both franchises to play each other in the playoffs. Has it been intense, or has it been lukewarm, slowly getting to be intense down the road?
Oh, yeah, it's anything but lukewarm. That's always been the funny part about this rivalry, is that when you talk to the players in both locker rooms, there hasn't been a lot of venom going back either way. Like I mentioned, the Kings players have been very open over the last couple of years, telling anybody that will listen that the Ducks really aren't their biggest rival, and that their hatred was for the Sharks and for the Canucks. And it wasn't the case if you talk to any of either of the fan bases. That is, the Anaheim fan base, it's sort of weird because I hate to use the phrase inferiority complex, but that's almost the way that it comes across. You have Northern California versus Southern California and the beat LA chants and, all that sort of rhetoric, and the no-cals are upset that, people in LA steal their water and all that stuff. But it really does, at least to me, come across like such an inferiority complex. And Orange County has always been like the little stepbrother to Los Angeles, whether you're talking about the Angels to the Dodgers or whatnot. And I mean, it's a weird dynamic that exists that I think that most people outside of Southern California probably can't fully understand. Orange County is, it's the cleaner, more beautiful area, but the grittier, more historical stuff all exists within LA. So the Anaheim fan base loved for years to throw in the face of the Kings fans that they had a Stanley Cup and the Kings didn't. The Kings solved that in 2012, and then the Anaheim fans turned to, well, we won ours first type of smack, which I'm not sure if that really is bragging rights of who won first, or the fact that it took the Kings, decades longer than it took the Ducks. At the end of the day, both franchises only had one Stanley Cup, and they both have been pretty successful over the last couple of years, and now it's an opportunity, I guess, for one to kind of take an early lead in what will be hopefully a long and much more heated rivalry between the two teams.
John, we're about a week removed now from the San Jose Sharks blowing the 3-0 series lead, so have things calmed down in San Jose, or do you expect some sort of shakeup? Because there's only so many years you can go by with all these playoff failures the Sharks have had without changing something up.
Well, how do you do that? I mean, that's really the golden question. I mean, how do you continue to put out do the same thing and expect different results? I mean, by nature, that's the definition of insanity, and that's really what's been going on in San Jose. Doug Wilson's a great guy. He's a nice GM, but this is on him as far as I'm concerned. Any talk of changing the coach out, it just prolongs the problem. We saw that in Vancouver. Change the coach, the problem doesn't go away. It's a roster problem. And when you look at your key leaders not stepping up and being able to perform in key situations year after year after year, you have to start to question that. And why in the world they gave Joe Thornton a 3-year extension and Patrick Marleau a 3-year extension back in January instead of dangling that carrot and just letting everybody kind of ride off into the sunset after another first-round exit is pretty amazing to me. So Todd McClellan's a great coach, and if I was him, I would be asking to be fired right now. And it seemed like he was doing that. We were up there for Game 7 for the for the pregame and postgame press conferences and all that stuff. And in the Game 7 postgame, it seemed like McClellan was asking out, and why not? There are some great job openings around the National Hockey League. And at some point, he has to just be scratching his head and say, what more can I do? I mean, you can say and you can ask and you can coach and you can teach and you can do all of these things, but at the end of the day, you're asking your players to step over, the wall there, get off the bench and go out on the ice and do it. And the Sharks just haven't been able to do that, regardless of all of their regular season success. So, in my opinion, the parts there on the roster need to change, and we've seen what Doug Wilson is capable of doing over the last, several years. It's time for a change at the GM level, and in order to do that, that's going to mean Doug Wilson has to be let go. It hasn't happened yet, and that's a good thing, though, because you don't want to make an emotional reaction. So I guess the answer to your question is, no, I'm not surprised that there haven't been changes yet, but I'd be shocked if there aren't some changes here over the next 6 weeks or so.
He is John Hoven, and the website is mayorsmanor.com. And, of course, follow him on twitter.com/mayorNHL for more thoughts and coverage of these incredible NHL playoffs. John, as always, thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
All right, boys. Have a great night. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. There you go. That's John Hoven from mayorsmanor.com.